Hello, everyone. I'll give you a second to get connected. Hello, and welcome to the Brooklyn Rail's 1329th New Social Environment. I'm Magali, a programs associate here at the Rail, and I have the pleasure and privilege of being your MC today for a conversation featuring Dan Cameron, Gianfranco Foschino, Karina Aguilera Skvirsky, Anelys Wolf, and Rodrigo Rojas. And now I'll introduce today's guest and host. For over 40 years, New York-based curator, art writer, and educator Dan Cameron has held senior curatorial positions at the New Museum, Orange County Museum of Art, and CAC New Orleans, and organized more than 100 museum exhibitions. He is the executive director of La Capilla Azul. Gianfranco Foschino is a Chilean video artist based in Santiago. Educated in cinema studies at UNI-ACC University, he develops a rigorous practice at the intersection of photography and film, employing a fixed camera to intensify perception and temporal awareness. Karina Aguilera Skvirsky is a multidisciplinary artist. In 2019, she received a Creative Capital grant to produce Sacred Geometry and How to Build a Wall and Other Ruins, a project that includes a multi-channel video installation and live performance. Anelys Wolf was born in Valdivia, Chile, and raised in Ancud, Chiloé, where she lives and works today. She studied painting at the University of Chile, where she received her BA in 1996. Wolf uses figurative painting to translate memory and cinema into present-day representations. And our host today, Rodrigo Rojas, is a Chilean poet, translator, and scholar whose work focuses on multilingual poetics and indigenous literature. He's the author of 5 poetry collections, most recently Viaje al Jardín de la Noche, and the essay book Lengua Escorada, Traducción como Resistencia en Cuatro Poetas Mapuche. And with that, I will hand it over to Rodrigo.
Thank you very much, Maggie. You did a great job introducing us, especially with all the linguistic potholes that we have in our biography. You even rolled your R's, which is a great achievement. Thank you very much. Let me tell you something about the place, not only the Capilla Azul. Let me tell you about the setting. This setting is in an island that belongs to the insular Patagonia. That's where the Patagonia starts. And from this side of the Andes, the Patagonia is green with lush forests, lots of rain, and the continent breaks up in 1,000 islands. In February, you have the whales come in to eat blue whales, orca, and sperm whales. Constantly, you have lots of penguins, especially Humboldt penguins. And in this island, you have a cultural tradition that is so rich. It is a fusion between the Huilliche, which is a land-based indigenous nation, the Chonos, which is a sea-based indigenous nation, and the settlers that came in the beginning from Spain, specifically from the north of Spain. They joined each other in wood making, and you have these beautiful churches that are built and are 400 years old, and they have not a single nail in their structure. So in this beautiful island, I heard about Dan Cameron and Ramon Castillo searching for a place to be transformed in a great center for the arts. And I was so surprised that they chose the smallest of all places. It is strange because they came here with a great ambition, and yet they chose a humble little chapel in the middle of a forest overlooking the river mouth that it's empty in low tide and full of beautiful blue water when it's high tide. They chose that place, and I was curious from the very start. And it is amazing. It is a small place where artists who have a great trajectory, sometimes international, meet up with local artists. And this is a characteristic. These local artists, some of them, they didn't even know that they were artists. They saw themselves sometimes as artisans. And these curators came and convinced them to expose their work, their craft. And when they started to dialogue with the work of the invited artists, sometimes of a national level and sometimes an overseas, very well known overseas, they realized that what they were doing was beyond craft. So that is the beginning of this magic. Magli, perhaps you can show us the slides so that images can support my words. Okay, so I began talking about the island. I began talking about Patagonia, the forests, because this is very important. And the thing is that even though I am mentioning things that belong to geography, biology, I am not talking specifically of landscape. I am talking about something that goes beyond landscape, because people, culture, and political settings, language, and many other cycles are incorporated in this experience and in the setting of this Capilla Azul. We call it territory, but it's not perhaps the most appropriate word, because it is based on the land, but it doesn't portray how big, how ample we understand this land. It goes beyond soil. But that is the word that we will use, because that is the word that people understand. But we will try to stretch that beyond in this conversation. So the first question that I have here is for Dan Cameron, but I will repeat the same question for all the other artists. I start with Dan because, well, you are part of the founding, team of this idea. So tell me, Dan, what is your experience that goes beyond this beautiful landscape? How do you think that this project makes the landscape much more than nature, much more than, the luscious forest, etc.? How does it become something that is connected to the territory?
Thanks, Rodrigo. That's a great question. I think that, the first time I went to Chiloé was with Gianfranco in 2015. And we stayed in Castro, which one does if one is a city person. And then, after you get to know Castro, maybe you get to know Ancud, maybe you visit Chonchi. And I think there's a tendency, unless you're, a committed backpacker, to circulate through the cities. And it wasn't until, again, with Gianfranco, I got to visit Comarca Contui for the first time, where I realized that these were city people. These were artistic. This is a very artistic family who had chosen to live in a very rural space. And their way of becoming part of the community that they were in, which is an agricultural community of 300 families, was very inspiring. And so, although we didn't think at first that these would be our hosts, we knew about the capilla, which you can see here right away, because that was the way they let people passing by on the road know that they had arrived at the lodge, if that makes sense. When you see the blue chapel, you're here, because the sign that says Comarca Contui is much smaller, but you can see the blue chapel as you're turning around the road. But to answer your question, I think once you begin to correctly proportion population in your mind, you realize that Chiloé is essentially a rural place. And to create a structure within a city would be to simply echo the conditions of urban life. Whereas we felt if this family had succeeded in becoming part of the community and actually making a valuable cultural contribution to the community, once it became possible that we could be thinking of the chapel as an exhibition space, we realized that they were our best example. They were teaching us how to adapt to this different scale in a rural environment.
Hmm. Okay, okay, I understand. Thank you for this, uh, for the memory of your first visit in 2015. And the difference between the city and the rural world. So, Karina, you are the, you know, in this group, you are the latest artist to have an exhibition there. And of course, it was the first time that you visited this island. How did you feel that your work challenged or entered in a dialogue with this setting, with a territory?
Thanks, Rodrigo. So I did a site visit in September of 2025, and Dan had already told me it's magical, but of course I didn't believe him until I was there, and he's right. It is magical. It's hard to explain in words. It's like going there was like being part of a really beautiful family. So I think the relationships I found super interesting and impactful, because it felt like it. Sorry, this is a little corny, but it felt like it was like built with like a lot of love, right? And so I was really, I had already been, when Dan and Ramon asked me to exhibit, I had already been working on a piece. And so that piece was actually weirdly, coincidentally connected to Catholicism. And so I won't talk too much about the piece now, but the point was, then I became really interested when I was there in literally La Capilla Azul, and just like its small but really potent presence. And I became really interested in all the other churches on the island, which I didn't have a chance to see all of them, but I did go to some of them. And that became kind of a counterpoint to the video that I exhibited. And so I was the thing about the wood, I was like really fascinated by and inspired by. But it's the place itself, like it's like the feeling or the aura around it that I think will most stay with me.
Okay, thank you. And did you feel that link through religion or spiritualism was important to link your work with the actual chapel?
Well, I think I would say that because even though my mother grew up Catholic, I really am not knowledgeable about being Catholic because I grew up more Jewish. And so um, I sort of, I was interested in not necessarily representing Catholicism, but exploring some of the more, I guess, fantastical parts of it, like what happens after you die. So my piece is called The Afterlife. So maybe it is spiritual, but I don't usually like add that kind of language to the work, so I kind of leave it open-ended. I definitely engages with Catholicism, but through like probably a fairly idiosyncratic way because I'm not super knowledgeable, or I don't have attachment to the kind of the representational parts of it. Like they don't affect me at a kind of affective way, but I find them interesting intellectually.
Well, one thing that caught my attention in Karina is linked also to the way in which Anelys works with drawing and painting, and Anelys explored many parts of the social landscape as well. People would see silhouettes and even their own figures, and sometimes even recognize shadows or of the same landscape. And what I linked between Anelys and Karina is that Karina, even though she works with this Catholic symbolism, but in fact, her work is showing something that is behind a culture. What supports an economy and a culture is so much linked to the suffering of slavery as well. And that links also to the relationship with death. So, and when I see Anelys, I remembered and I said, oh, Anelys is also working with something that is underneath, because she is somebody who grew up in that island. So she doesn't fall for the, what we call the magic. She falls for something quiet. She falls for not just quiet. She falls for actual ritual silence. And sorry, Anelys, but that is my personal interpretation of your work. But it's still, it is resounding. And whenever I try to remember it, that is the first thing that comes to mind. So let me ask you, since you out of all the artists, you are the only one who's actually lived for years there. And tell me, what is your relationship with that territory? And do you find something particularly different from what the city and space that you grew up, and the actual setting of this Capilla Azul in terms of social and cultural landscape as well?
I am from the island from generations. My father born and in the island, my mother too, my grandfathers too. I have a lot of history with all the different places of the island. So in particular, in this case, I approached my approximation to what to do in Capilla Azul is through like ghosts. I connect with the history. I go to the photograph archives to look over and over more and more people that is not my family, but probably they are. Mm-hmm. And I start to invent a history that can be or not, but 100% it's something that it's real. Mm-hmm. And this presence of people, is a relation with death. In that moment when I made these paintings, I work so quickly because I have 1 month to do, because I move a lot. And my father passed away. And a few weeks ago, I was in this I was like dreaming. I don't know, I was not waking up. So Capilla Azul, I don't know the name, the word.
Say in Spanish.
Ellos me acogieron.
Oh, okay. I was held by them.
I feel something very sure there with the community. in Capilla Azul. But for me, was a connection with this part of the island. I came from the other part, but it's like they see me and I feel that the community feel that I am part of the family, something like that. I don't know. I am from my bones part of this.
Perhaps people here, the audience, can see in your work what I was speaking about, the silence. That, you know, these people are witnesses. And I know that you compose the images, but you take actual people who are in photographs and you compose a new image. And you talk about fiction. And when you were talking about fiction, I remembered Werner Herzog's latest essay when he said, you know, if I really want to be true, I must use fiction. Otherwise, I can only use data, and data is dead. Data doesn't show what is really alive. And I can see the you know, what you talk about memory, and I had forgotten that your father had died very, you know, close to the time in which you were going to, you know, exhibit your work. Maybe, you know, Anelys's father, he's a very well-respected playwright. And that's Egon Wolf, isn't it?
Yeah, but was more than my father in this exhibition. This is the spirit of the dead, you know, but it's not about my father. It's about all the people that are around, the people that pass away, that probably have the opportunity to stay again with us, and we can read what they can say through my work, you know. It's an opportunity for other people that are dead.
Yes. So if you want to be truthful, you must use fiction. If you want to be eloquent, here you must choose silence. That's what I see in your work. And
the painting is silence always.
Okay, so we were talking about landscape, and these, you know, these people are, you know, in your work are always in a communal space. You always paint like groups of people interacting. So the memory here is a live memory because people are building community in your work.
And
that's why I say it's
and
there is something here. Yeah. And, you know, the people who come to the chapel, they recognize that, because that could be their own table. That could be, you know, their own birthday. That could be their grandparents or whatever. So great. So, okay. So now we talked about silence, and now I would like to talk about stillness. What happens when you portray absolute stillness? And in order to portray that stillness, you need a small and subtle element. Otherwise, that stillness is not perceived. And with that, you know, I choose to pose this question to Gianfranco, who works in another medium. Of course, he works with images, but he works in another medium. He works with, you know, with video art. And for this specific show, he had two pieces. One is a window, and the other one is a very rural setting where almost nothing important happens. But with that, you know, humble, unimportant thing, you realize that there is not only attention, but there is this, you know, rich undertone underneath that. That's the window. Beautiful, beautiful. So tell me, Gianfranco, you also come from a family that is linked to Chiloé. You somehow are related to this cultural landscape. Do you think that How do you think that your work was related to that community and to that, cultural heritage of the island?
Oh, thank you, Rodrigo. Yeah, my grandmother is from Chiloé. She's a 95 years old woman, the only survivor of the whole family, Andrade Barrientos. So she kept all the story and all this all this small story of the island, and I'm very happy to have her around. Actually, she was at the opening of my show and has been from the beginning of the history of Capilla Azul around, celebrating this special location, and she's very proud of the whole project, and has to do with to live in a small island. It has to do with isolation, and I think that is a great opportunity, this possibility of having shows in a very tiny town. And getting back to my work, I work with video, but in a so my main theme somehow is time, and these little towns or these rural places has a different figure of time. Time develops in a totally unique way, and the I don't know, protagonist, the people or the scenarios are very unique also. So I'm a kind of artist that is not working in a studio much, but more into the territory, looking for places, listening, and trying to capture the essence of different kind of places that has their own story, and most of the time are very common stories. In this case, we are looking from a screen, kind of a different screen, or from a window, another window. So I think it's this dialogue between the work and the observer through the time that is kind of like the key that I want to give to the person that is in front of my work. Standing there, you start to discover that inside the image there are plenty of things happening, and in this case are also old women looking through the window, trying to to understand what is going on outside, and we as observers, we are looking to the window, trying to discover what is happening inside. So it's a silent dialogue that is happening, I think, in this specific work, that you don't need much to know about the background of the work itself to be involved, because the act of observing is something that we have in common. It's a common language, and I think that is something that I like about these works that are silent most of the time, that you don't know the nature of the image sometimes, because it has a very strong dialogue with painting or with photography, and that anyone, like a little kid or anyone, can discover by themselves what's going on, and there is not a specific story or are not strongly narrative.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So thank you very much, Gianfranco. And if you allow me to make just a short commentary on this specific picture that you're looking in your screen. Well, of course, this is just a picture, so it's, no wonder that nothing is moving there. But when you look at this live, this is just like what you would see. That, that person, that character is not moving. And the reflection on the glass pane, there is no blue skies. The blue sky is captured in the corrugated iron, and then suddenly from the dark a new face appears, and that small face there moves out of the picture, and then you realize, okay, something is happening. And the people who go there, many of them have never been to a gallery, many of them have never talked about art. But when they see this observation, they say, wow, this happens in my neighborhood. This happens in the house next door. I've seen this. And I like that when that happens. And that happens, with many of the artists that have exhibited here, that people feel that the distance from the rural setting to the art is not as big. So tell me, Dan, let me close this and then we go to a Q&A. Dan, how do you feel about that distance between the neighbors of this Capilla Azul? People who, have sheep or they work with bees, or they go out to fish or whatever. What do you think that the distance between the artworks that have been exhibited here and the neighbors?
Well, I mean, I think that question is at the essence of what we're doing, Rodrigo, because I mean, like the Caravaggio Contreras family, who are the owners of Comarca Contuy, of the lodge where Capilla Azul is located. We came there as strangers, as outsiders. And so our commitment wasn't to live there. But once we did make the commitment to restore and renovate the Capilla and turn it into an exhibition space, we either took our commitment seriously and followed through on that, or we didn't. And we needed to fulfill what we had started. And I think one way of understanding that was to say, between ourselves, this space belongs to the community. And, at the beginning, you showed an aerial map of the Comarca with the 3 rural schools. And one of the things that I'll say about the family, the Caravaggio Contreras family, is that shortly after they arrived in the community, they got very involved in the local school system, in the 3 local elementary schools. And they began introducing art techniques as a fundamental basis for primary education. And, this just it started as an informal neighborly thing, but over time it grew into a much more, I would say, pedigreed program where art educators and art education faculty from major universities in Santiago come to Contuy to hold workshops and to continue the work with these 3 rural schools. So for us, the commitment that you make to the community when you become part of it is to say, in our case, literally, this belongs to, they are our public. The 300 families that live in Contuy are our public. It's rural, and because it's rural, that seems like a limited amount of people. But then we also want to make sure that our expanded public are those who are interested in what we're doing, who are following what we're doing, maybe who come to some of our openings or not. But they are, in a way, they'll always be sort of secondary. So we made certain decisions. This church was deconsecrated, but otherwise it's the same church that was the local church that people got baptized in, that people got married in. We never took off the cross, for example, because that seemed like that would be, I don't know, adding insult to injury in a way. I mean, the cross is part of the symbolism of the church. And as Karina mentioned with her piece, you can employ ideas and symbols from Catholic teaching without having to invest it with some kind of sacred or mystical, meaning. You don't have to be necessarily a believer to deploy these kinds of artifacts. So, I mean, I think we have a little more time. I was wondering if we could talk a little bit about this work that you're seeing right now.
Yes, please go ahead. We have some time. Go
Yeah.
ahead.
So this is the work of Raquel Aguilar, who did a collaboration. Maybe if you move two slides before, or one slide before, using the no, next one. Moving a little fast here. I think you're going ahead rather than forward, than back. Okay, right there. Yes. Can you not scroll and just focus? Oops. So move ahead one, just use the arrow. That way you don't have to scroll. Ahead. We're going backwards. Let's go ahead. All right. Well, this is Sebastian Priest's work. Well, this is Alfredo Jar's installation. That was Alfredo's installation was okay. Can we stop scrolling for a little bit and just move back? All right. Yeah,
Where do you want me, Dan? I'm sorry.
Yeah, well, there was an order, and now we're kind of out of order. So why don't we back up to the piece that's coming up right now before the Alfredo Jar? No. Go back. Yes, right there.
This one here?
Yes. Okay, thanks. So from here, we're just going to go forward one at a time. This was a project we did in September of 2024 where Voluspa Harpa, who's a well-known Chilean artist, collaborated directly with Raquel Aguilar, who is from Cayon nearby, but who, as Rodrigo mentioned, grew up not really able to conceive of herself as an artist, even though it was clear when you visited her studio that what she was making was sculpture. She just didn't call it that. So you can sort of see the figure on the right. It was a 10-foot tall forest woman. And then, Magli, if you move two slides ahead. Sorry, one more slide ahead. And one more slide ahead. About 6 months after the exhibition at Capilla Azul, Patricia Reddy, who has a large gallery in Santiago, heard about the work, invited Raquel to have a one-person exhibition at her gallery, which was very successful. She sold all of her work, and one of the pieces was acquired by the National Museum of Fine Arts. And I think with that transition for us, we were able to demonstrate that what we were trying to address wasn't any absence of artistic genius in Chiloé. There was obviously plenty of artistic genius, but rather that the infrastructure was such that if you created a platform for someone like Raquel Aguilar and you allowed people to see the work, then the work itself would find an audience. It would find a bigger public. She would, be able to be understood and recognized for the quality of the work that she was doing. If we move ahead, I would just want to talk a little bit about, if you don't mind my taking over. This is one of the works from the Patricia Radio show. Silvia Rivera, who you saw earlier on, had an exhibition last year, organized for the Centro Monte Carmelo in Santiago. So again, the artists from Chiloé were trying to bring their work to Santiago so that they can be exposed to a much bigger public, because Santiago still is where everything seems to happen in Chile. This is the invitation for Gianfranco's show with Esteban Perez, who lives in Puerto Varas. I didn't mean to take over the driver's seat here, Rodrigo. Sorry, I just
No, you're doing a great job. You know why? Because it's very important to understand the range of visual art that you are selecting here. Okay, it's very important because if we were talking about a community, and it's great because you talked about a desecrated church, but let me remind you that church is in Latin is a ecclesia, and ecclesia doesn't refer to a building. Ecclesia is a community. So
perfect.
and this is maintained through this through the curatorship. It just so happens that it's inside a chapel, but the actual community, the ecclesia, goes far beyond, and that is knitted thanks to the works. So I wouldn't have been able to use the verb knit if you hadn't shown Raquel Aguilera.
For example.
Please, can you refer to Sebastian Pries's work, because in the picture it's so difficult to understand, and I think this is very important because it is the direct link with the actual natural surrounding. And Magli, can you show it's a picture with a fallen tree, the uprooted tree
right there. Yes,
right.
Yeah, so Sebastian and Anelys had a dialogue about time with Ramon and myself. And what Sebastian wanted to do really was move out of the chapel. He was sort of the first artist to say, well, I'm going to tackle the landscape itself as my theme. He found a discarded boat on the shore, and very, very meticulously dismantled it into parts and created temporary sculptures that he set up around the property. And then a major storm went through and completely decimated everything that he had done. Significant parts of the installation were gone forever, and some of the pieces were barely saved. So in this case, we had him come back and sort of reconstitute the piece using the damage caused by the storm itself as the sort of compositional armature for his intervention.
Yeah.
And pieces of it are still around.
Yeah. I remember the first gesture of Sebastian Pries when he found this abandoned boat was to disassemble and to look for the same kind of tree that was the origin of that wood. So, his alteration of the landscape was just to return the planks to the actual tree.
Correct.
And it was beautiful because after that, a storm tore through the forest and uprooted those trees. So that's where we can see now the colored pieces of wood. Those are belonging to the boat. It's now part of the future soil of that tree.
Definitely.
It's great. So one question, and this question goes to Karina and to Anelys. Okay, you've had this experience in this little chapel, and also you've exhibited in other places, in other countries. So could you please think about what kind of future you see to such a place? What kind of future? Like, ¿qué futuro tú ves para la Capilla Azul? Can you imagine how it should grow, what things should include from your own artistic perspective? Anelys, why don't you start?
I think Capilla Azul is an experience that I don't know. what happened with this, because it's the relation with each artist that will visit the place. So for me, it's a school. Is to see how Capilla Azul makes relation with the community. How important is that the art goes to the rural places and not to the big cities, and this demonstrates that we can go in the other way. You know, it's very important to change lives, because the people that lives in places like Capilla Azul, or I am in the north of the island, and I start to make an exhibition in another little place, because this is a very good example how the art have to go to different places. And I think it's a very good example for all the other communities, how you can create a relation between art and communities. It not only is a dialogue between artists, that's has always happened, you know. So this kind of break in the logic that we have with art, I think is very, very, very important to appreciate and to copy in a good way. I don't know. It's a very influenced place, I think. So what happened there is the of the artist and the relation in the future.
Okay, thank you very much. So you see, you know, a future strengthening the relationship and the dialogue between the art and the community. Great.
I see Chiloé as a body with hands, and like the blood. You have to make the blood goes everywhere. Not only Capilla Azul. It's not only a point, a new center. We need a lot of centers. We have to, probably Capilla Azul can move and goes to different places.
Okay, that's great, Anelys, because the picture that we are seeing now is a work that represents a heart. And then that was connected to veins that came in and out of the chapel. So what you're suggesting, that the Capilla Azul should see itself as an organ able to pump out artistic blood and to irrigate different communities, perhaps the whole island. So, Karina, what do you think? What could be a future way of developing this artistic project?
I mean, I think just to expand on what Anelys talked about, is that it's a really interesting model. So it's really interesting to think about community as more expansive than our very small art community, which is, you know, sometimes, you know, I love it, but it's great for it to expand. And I think to center community and to center even to center like non-art communities and bring them in and make art accessible, you know, in different ways by just inviting them. I think that model really lends itself to an acknowledgement of how important art is to integrate into our lives, right? And that it doesn't have to be this exclusive or elite kind of space, right? It can be inclusive, it can be accessible, and it is still really good. Like all of those things can happen at the same time. And so I think a place like Capilla Azul that just seems so unlikely because it seems so far from all the art centers, and yet it has become its own art center, is an excellent model for the future that that I think others can learn from.
Mm-hmm. Thank you. Thank you very much. And Gianfranco, you talked about your grandmother, 95 years old, and uh, assisting all, many exhibitions. And I remember her dancing past midnight and with more energy than anyone who's younger than her. But I also remember her commitment to education. And also, I remember her own mother, who gave her name to the public library of Castro. So you come from a line of women who are linked to the community, and they are committed to the development of minds and sensibility. So coming from that lineage, how do you see a possible future for this Capilla Azul project? What areas should this capilla develop in order to grow?
Yeah, I think the major challenge is to really connect foreign artists with the local artists, to give the space and the time to that this communication starts, because something is what someone brings from abroad to the Capilla Azul or to the project itself, and something different is a dialogue that appears truly in these two personalities, two process, two ways of looking to the space. So I think like this could be like a more experimental process. I think the Capilla Azul has everything to bring this process to happen. Is how do you react to the place, and how this creativity between people that are probably they don't know themselves react to this place. Someone is local, someone has maybe more tools to approach, and the one that is from abroad has less tools to approach probably the exhibition or the process, because sometimes there is the process is more important than the exhibition itself. So I think, getting back to my grandmother, she was a teacher, and I think the most, and my grandmother also, and I think that what I learned from her is that is not like to teach is not hard. Is something that you have to feel, and it's more the idea of sharing knowledge, So I think that Capilla Azul has this possibility, and probably in the future is going to be in my way of seeing, is the most powerful thing. It's not to make an exhibition. You can make exhibition everywhere. It's more to bring a process together with two artists that can do something experimental and something unique in these kind of places.
Yeah, true. So Dan, we have, pump artistic blood to the rest of the island. We have direct conversation with the media community. And now we have experimentation and process as a pedagogical approach to this Capilla Azul. So I hope that you've been taking notes, because I think those are great ideas.
I have pages of notes, but can I get you to go back about 10 slides, Magli, if you can? There's one thing I meant to cover, and we didn't really have a chance to, starting with me in that studio right there.
Mm.
So I just want to take the last few minutes and talk a little bit about Rafael Lara, who is important to me in the evolution of my relationship to Chiloé. He was a very good friend of Anelys's. Gianfranco met him right on the very beginning as well. Rafael was a self-taught printmaker. He was originally from Valdivia and came to Ancud, literally to learn how to make prints. When I got to know him, he was very involved in making his practice sustain kind of Mapuche philosophy and spiritualism through his art. Even more importantly, he was an interlocutor for me in terms of explaining some of the historical cultural weight of conflicts that are related to the colonial period, but of which there are still traces that can be felt today. And he was very sensitive to this, and he wanted me to be very sensitive to it. And when we decided to do an exhibition together, we decided that instead of inviting an artist from the outside, as Gianfranco mentioned, what we would do is we would include his students. So Raphael died in July of 2024, and we were at the end of June 2024, and we were only able to make the exhibition. Next image, please. In September, this is actually where he worked. He would always display his students' work. Some of these students are 4 or 5 years old, and he would always have them on display whenever we came to visit, in case we wanted to take a couple of things home with us. Next image, please. And this is one of his works dealing with the execution of an important Mapuche figure, activist figure from the 1880s. And I think the last of the 4 images here shows the installation. At Capilla Azul, we actually made vitrines to sort of bring all of the work together, sort of teachers and students. And most importantly, his daughter came and kind of worked closely with us to bring things together. So my feeling really in this case is that if we can promote the work of a teacher, if we can promote the work of someone who's sharing art with an at-risk community, and even more importantly, if we can bring the adult versions of some of these student artists back to Capilla Azul and back to art through their own experience of learning through Raphael, I think we'll have accomplished something significant. And my last little bit is going to be, we published an actual catalog for this show. It's touring museums throughout Chile. It's the first exhibition we've done where we framed all the work and put it in travel crates with wheels, so that we can send it. It's been in Puerto Varas. It's going to Iquique, to Valparaiso, and later to Santiago. So one way I think of getting the culture of Chiloé out to the world, as Anelys said, is to actually physically bring it there and share it with them. So we're hoping to do that as well. But Raphael was a very particular and special case. Thanks for letting me.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Dan, for your last bit, because I think that wasn't, that's something that we should have covered. And not only because it is a close relationship with a community, even with kids who are, exhibited there as, full artists. Not only that, but what you described is also, the cultural / political edge of this project. And that's, I think that's very important to mention. It's not propaganda, but it touches upon certain conflicts and is able to develop a vocabulary that allows people to talk about them, but in not in a conflictive way, but reflexive, which is very good. I really like that.
Thank you.
I think that we have reached the time for the Q&A. So, Magli, do you have questions for the people, for the people here?
Yes, thank you all so much for such a wonderful conversation. We have a few questions lined up. For people in our audience, if you have a question for our guests today, please feel free to submit it in the link in the chat. and we will turn to you next. The first question comes from William Morrow, and I'll give you a chance to unmute William.
Oh, hi, everyone. Fascinating conversation. Can you hear me?
Mhm.
Oh, great. Actually, the artist, your last question, Rodrigo, to the artist actually kind of covered a lot of what I was thinking. I think this is totally radical and amazing work to be doing. And I think Aaliyah's comment about, I think it was Aaliyah talking about a break in logic, or maybe that was Karina that said that. But I guess so. I would actually turn the same question to Dan, if I may. Good to see you, Dan. What I guess the question really is, you've now spent multiple years, 3 or 4 years in this community. Um, is there, obviously it's a very special place, and I should also preface this. I'm currently working in the archipelagos of the Pacific Northwest, and so there's a lot of similarities in some of the conversations around community engagement, and I find that there's a sense of urgency there. So the question to you, Dan, is, do you find a sense of urgency in this work? I think it's a loaded question, but that speaks to sort of this sort of counter to the art worlds, plural, that you've had the privilege to work in and you continue to work in other communities. Um, uh, what is it about this place that keeps pulling you back? Because it's obviously, there's only so much time in the day to curate and to pour ourselves into these projects. So I'd be just curious to hear, just sort of on a 50,000 foot view, why you keep coming back to Chile.
Um, well, I've kept coming back to Chile for a whole lot of reasons because I've been sort of investigating Chile for about 35 years. Um, but the seed for Chiloé was planted right there at the beginning by Eugenio Dittborn, who's a very influential thinker. And it wasn't until years later when Gianfranco took um, Dittborn's suggestion that I curate something in Chiloé and said, that's a great idea. I'm going to bring you there. And so I got introduced to Chiloé through Gianfranco. It's taken me some years to understand, for example, how the framework I started working within to do Prospect New Orleans after Hurricane Katrina, and how that applies, if it does, to Chiloé. And I think there's a question of imbalance. In New Orleans, you had this obvious richness culturally, and institutions to support it, but kind of almost a lack of something unifying to pull the city together. And I thought, art could be that vehicle. And in a way, it was trying to redefine how tourism could exist in a touristic city in a way that tried to address the imbalance, address the bad equilibrium. In Chiloé, I feel that culturally Chile is such a centralized country in terms of cultural priorities, institution, distribution of resources. And when you go to Chiloé, you notice that the trickle down effect, once it gets to Chiloé, is sort of, it really is a trickle. When we got there in 2015, there were two contemporary art galleries, right? The month we opened, the last of those two galleries closed. So, so there was about a week there where in all of Chiloé, there was no space for contemporary art, period. And in a way, I feel like, okay, we got open in the nick of time. So we're making an argument within Chile where we're trying to say to our peers in Santiago, folks, you've kind of got it wrong. Really, just because there are fewer people here, the proportion of artist to non-artist is wild. And the depth of tradition and the depth of cultural excellence is off the charts. And so all that's lacking is a little bit of exposure. All that's missing is for an artist working in Chiloé to feel that they have as much of a future professionally as an artist working in Santiago. And if that imbalance can be addressed through our activities, that's what that we would consider what we're doing to be a success. Now, there's going to be a bridge that's opening up between the mainland and Chiloé in the next few years. And it's likely that that bridge is going to have some kinds of impacts on the culture, some of which won't be positive. And so, in a way, if you ask if we're in a hurry, I would say that we are, if we're trying to make our argument clear before that happens, so that we can point to a before time, that we were able to do X, Y, and Z, and then the after time as well. And then as far as my relationship to the rest of the art world goes, William, I think it has to do with a feeling about slow art. I realize that we have been, you know, speeding everything up, art fairs and everything's happening so fast. I'm a city person. I love the city, but I'm not from the city. And I feel very identified with rural culture. And it took me 50 years before I felt that way, but I do. It feels very good to me. It feels like a better way to live. Right? I can't say it any more clearly. It feels like a better way to live. And that's something that they're teaching us. And I feel like through what we do at the Capilla Azul, this idea of this is a better way to live is clear. The people that come to us for the weekend, show up on Friday, leave on Monday, they understand that. I think that's what they're really appreciating, is that this is a slower process. You don't have to make up your mind in 5 minutes. Everything happens at a different rate. And maybe that's our relationship, if we can say it that way, to the art world written large.
Thank you. This idea of stillness and time that Rodrigo was talking about earlier, it's palpable when you're on an island. It doesn't, in 24 hours you feel your heart rate lowering. It's an amazing thing. Thanks for sharing that, Dan. I appreciate it.
Thanks, William.
Thank you for that question, William. Our next question is from Ruth Owens, and I'll give you a chance to unmute Ruth.
Okay, can you hear me?
Perfectly.
Okay. Hi, Dan.
I-
So yeah, coming from New Orleans, I'm always I am an artist, and I am very interested in how the living with the environment impacts my artwork in particular, and especially since we are the people that are the ones that are subject to natural disasters probably first in this nation. But I always think about how we can live in reciprocity with the natural world. And when you say, Dan, that it's a better way to live in that rural setting, I wonder if not just thinking about community and community as an isolated entity, but community and the ecology and the landscape around that particular island can be thought of as one thing.
Oh, is that the question?
Yes, because I mean, it's, to me, I don't want to separate community and the natural world. I think of it as a continuity, or that we are part of that, they are and the natural environment is part of us. So I just wonder if that, I mean, can be brought to the forefront a little more.
I couldn't agree more. And it's what you're describing is hard to put your finger on in a way, though, because it involves a lot of intuitiveness. I mean, we feel when we're together at Capilla Azul, we feel that what we're doing is we're generating a kind of a space and a spirit and a dynamic between us that brings out the best of us. And while we're there together, we're also being fed like royalty. And, even when it's raining, it's spectacular. And everyone's very kind, and, you don't get your lettuce from the supermarket down the street. You get the lettuce from La Signora Cotti, who's from up the street. And when you're visiting La Signora Cotti, you also learn about other things that, everything about the community spills over and blends into everything else. So when you talk about the community and nature not being separate, I think that is the subjective experience we all have when we're there, that we're just very fortunate to be living in this situation of, if not complete reciprocity, at least sort of deep appreciation for what it is that we have at that moment.
Okay. Thank you, Dan. Yeah, I just wanted to talk about that entanglement.
I'm glad you did.
Thank you for that question, Ruth. The next question is from another audience member who is wondering if any of the artists have any specific workshops that they'd love to teach at La Capilla Azul in the future.
Great question. That's a great question.
I think you're one of the artists now, Rodrigo.
No, but that's a great idea to open up workshops for people, not only of the community, but anyone who wants to come from anywhere. Because I think that the best instructor of that workshop is, the forest that surrounds that capilla. I remember now this last summer, which is February here in Chile. I went into the forest and stayed silent there in order for the birds to approach me. And I was hoping to see one bird that is very shy, the wed, because when you see that bird, it brings you very good luck. And I was thinking, about the silence, how hard it was for me to reach that silence. And my anxiety, expecting that one bird. Then when I closed my eyes, I felt like right next to me, like 2 feet from my boots, I saw the wet bird. I started singing and then called to another wet bird. And then suddenly I had like 5 around me. And of course, after that, I went and played the lottery because I haven't won it yet, but perhaps it's another kind of luck, but I'll tell you. And, those kind of workshops, in combination with, something about a certain craft from the island and then mixed up, with the artist practice, that would be great. I would take that workshop like tomorrow.
Well, for some time we were doing Baños del Bosque, where you
yes,
go to the forest and just immerse yourself, like a guided appreciation.
Yes, I remember that. I took some. It was wonderful. Yes.
Karina, Anelys, do you have workshops you'd like to teach? Maybe. In a perfect world.
I have no big experience teaching. So.
I mean, there is a photographer already there, but I would probably be interested in like something with cyanotypes because they're so indexical and you can really connect to the environment and something like that, like Anna Atkins style or something.
Great.
John, can you imagine coming back and teaching a workshop? Gianfranco? Oh, yes, it's mute on.
Oh, yes. Sorry. I'm not sure. I have the impression that I learn constantly when I'm there. So to teach is something delicate to me. But I'm a big observer, so probably could be something similar than the experience that Rodrigo was talking about, to listen. Like my videos are silent, most of them, but I'm constantly listening to the places I'm in order to get to specific atmospheres. So I think I don't know if it's contradictory, but one of the major senses I have when I work is to listen, you know. So I think and to get lost, that's kind of like one of my major uh, practices somehow, I'm professional. I'm a professional getting lost person. When I get lost, I found something that was out of my mind before, and I think that's the most beautiful thing. And that is something that constantly in this kind of places appears. What I like about capturing time is to get a memory, because our memory are very delicate, so the camera has the possibility to bring back those memories, and time is also very delicate, it's something. And in Chiloé, you can feel that, weather is constantly changing, and you can see, I don't know, like 4 rainbows in the same day. So if you want to discover the magic of the place, you have to be very in the present, and that is what I constantly force myself when I'm in the city or any place, to be present, not to find something, or to bring what I want into the location, but more to be open to capture something that the location is telling you in this with this voice that is not human.
May I say something?
Yeah.
I was thinking about the question, and I am not a teacher. It's not my thing, but a good experience that can happen in Capilla Azul can be open atelier, for example, or a resident, an open residence, but because to see an artist's work can be a good exchange, not only to teach, but to show how you work can be a good experience to give something.
Mm-hmm.
Great idea.
Yeah, that's a great idea. Yeah,
that might be our fall exhibition. But anyway.
Okay. Are there more questions?
We have one last question from Fong, who I am not. Oh, there he is. All right, I'll give you a chance to unmute Fong.
Hey, Fong.
Thank you, Madly. Thank you, Dan. Thank you, Rodrigo, and everyone's here at the fabulous news residency in Chile. Would you believe it? It's quite remarkable. I want to ask a question. So I was in a meeting, so I couldn't hear the whole thing, but I will as soon as weekend. The pleasure of re-listen in the weekend have always been the pleasure for everybody, applied to everybody who couldn't come to our lunch as they used to during the pandemic, but it lives on in evening, weekend, and so on. So I'm sure many will tune in to really listen to this NSE. So Dan, an important question, because Ashbury used to come here for dinner occasionally. John was important mentor of yours. And I remember once asking John, who was his mentor? One thing that I noticed that when we involve in the community, this is to your point early on, the question you had, William, is that mentorship it doesn't have to be overtly visible. It can be very subtle, It's just a matter of older artists in dialogue with the younger ones. And that applied to all the discipline. This is the core philosophy of the rail. But I remember asking John, who was important poet to him, and he said it was W.H. Auden, who included a poem of his, I believe it was called Some Trees, in the Yale anthology for young poet. Must have been in, you can correct me, Dan, but okay, super early. It's so interesting in that regard because, John became an art critic by accident in some way. He ran into Mark Kozlov, who then happened to be in Paris, and he decided to finish his dissertation on Raymond Rousseau, and he sent so many letters without responses. Finally, he decided to take on the trip to search to see Mrs. Raymond Rousseau, and he ran to Mac Kozlov, and he said, "You're very lucky. She's my landlady." You remember that story? So he managed to finish his writing then, but in the same week or so, he ran into Annette Michelson, who was the preeminent art critic for Herald Tribune, and she had to return to New York to look after her father illness. So she gave that job to John. It's incredible how the baton get passed on,
It is.
What's my question? It is that. My point is you start working out off as an assistant to John. My question is how poetic, community or thinking of such poetic terms transform that mentorship into being who you shape to be later as an art writer and art critic and curator, all of it.
Wow. As an avowed non-poet, I think I could probably best answer that question by saying that I worked for John in a capacity as a personal secretary. So while I could absorb his poetry on my own time, what I absorbed when I was with him was his way of going about the things of the world, dealing with his editors,
Mm-hmm.
his translators, dealing with contracts, dealing with students, dealing with teaching responsibilities. And I learned from John what it was like to be a free spirit, a poet, but especially a gentleman.
Mm-hmm.
He had certain standards of civility in your behavior and your demeanor, in the way that you treated other people. And I think everything I learned about how a sensitive, artistic person who's nonetheless driven can function in the art world
Mm-hmm.
without letting ambition just sort of take over and turn you into a monster, because John never, ever had a monstrous side. And I think that's one of the reasons, is because he dealt with everything in his life as an expression of his essence as a poet. Even when it had nothing to do with poetry, it was still, I think, related to that. That's the best answer I can improvise right now.
Well, the longer answer will be provided later when I see you in person.
Fair enough.
Okay. No, I was thinking also, since we are coming to this June, which will be Frank O'Hara centennial celebration. So I'm thinking about how the community of poets are so integral to the world of artists at the New York School Poets and Painter, all integrated, belong to one unified community. And that's something we're trying to do here at the Rail. So anyway, Dan, thank you all. Thank you, Rodrigo. Thank you, everybody here, really. And I can't wait to tune in a bit later. Thank you. Thank you. Back to you, Matley.
Thank you for that question, Fong. And thank you, Dan, Gianfranco. Or no, before I do that, Rodrigo is going to close us out with a
Yes.
poem.
Yes.
I'm jumping the gun. I will hand it right back over to you, Rodrigo, to close us out.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. So a few years ago, I went to upstate New York to a little lake called Hunt Lake. And we had a residence there with poets. And I met Franz, and Franz lived by the lake and had, I don't know how many beehives, but, he worked with bees. And As I approached his bees, I remembered Chiloé, which is the other place where I have connection with bees. So this poem is in between these two landscapes, and it's called Not Wild. We had to meet early. What we needed was the morning to be cold, the sun to be young and feeble, but the damp heat of August had the bees already busy in Hunt Lake. Flight paths were elliptical and interlaced, 1, 2 frames, a third, and we could not find the queen. Her subjects tolerated us for a while, then dived methodically against us, the intruders. Their effort was evident. Defenders perched on our screen mask, abdomens with lancets ready in full view as they searched for a gap to strike through. Franz had warned us about this with a few sentences. He used kind verbs when talking about his bees. I wish I could remember them now. All I have is a cloud in which he talks about being part of the hive. More than a month has passed now. I flew back to Chile. We voted for a new constitution and lost. Franz comes to mind with his tale about the beheading of infertile queens, about beekeepers passing and the formal announcement of the death to the hive. Suddenly, I wanted a task like that. May I have a word with you, dear swarm? I will dance in eights to tell you about a dream that has expired. Please don't leave. I'll carry you through the cold. A queen has just died in England, an actual human queen. Surely a footman of hers or her valet had to stand in front of the hive to deliver the news. I would have embraced such a core. This fall, the royal garden has left some flowers open for business. It's a sunny day. The hive smells of heat, as sensuous as it surrounds, as waxy as it feels to the touch. If heat has a sense, then this is it. Dear bees, an old queen has died. She lived in a gilded hive built on the back of others, many of them slaves. But don't take that too literal. You should know what that means. I'm not sure if she had any honey, or if it's any of it's relevant. But let me tell you that this queen saw a ripe empire crumble and blown back into pollen. I'm here to tell you this. We must remain together for the coming winter. I promise you, you'll be cared for. Please don't leave. Many plucked flowers will be available soon. Morning will sound to you like a low buzz. There'll be some loud knifing too, but you can relate to that, can you? I come with a clear message. Hope that I've secreted pheromones in the appropriate time and intensity. Consider my heart. Feel its pounding. Think of it as a lovely wild garden with those charming bells that we call fuchsias. Let these words be the anthers caressing your hairy legs with pollen. I've never talked to bees. I've burnt their wax for light. I've dropped their honey into my morning coffee, but never have I talked to them about the dead. It seems tragic that they might leave. Please stay in France's backyard by the lake. Please don't leave the palace and don't abandon my little country. Who makes that final decision? Who? Does the queen ponder the options by herself? Is there a high council in the shadows, or is it the whole hive that hums out? Where is that one mysterious direction where they go? Who knows? They may be like Chile, not wild and not completely domesticated either. That's it. Thank you very much.
Bravo.
Thank you so much, Rodrigo. What a beautiful way to close us out. And thank you to Dan, Gianfranco, Karina, and Anelys. We'd also like to thank the Marion Bolton Kippy Stroud Foundation and Seeger Foundation for sponsoring our NSE program. in making these weekday conversations possible, and for their support of our growing archive, which you can view on the Rail's YouTube channel. The Rail has been free and independent for 25 years. A donation directly supports our writers, production staff, and operations. Support our work through the link in the chat. And if you're free, join us tomorrow at 1 p.m. for a conversation with Carlos Basualdo, Kianja Strobert, Richard Schiff, and Amanda Gluibizi on the event of Jasper Johns Between the Clock and the Bed at Gagosian. And as is Rail tradition, you can now all unmute and say hello and goodbye as you leave. Thank you all again so much.
Never
Thank you so
domesticated.
much. Thank
Go.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Amazing.
Wonderful.
Yay.
Team, great team.
Thank you, Dan.
Thank you.
Benissimo.
Until we meet again
Keep
in
up the good
Chile.
Yes,
Salute.
yes. Never domesticated.
Chile.
Ever. Never
Bye,
domesticated.
everybody.
Ever. Yes. Long live Chile.
Interesante.